Hello everyone, you're very welcome to this presentation. I've been asked to reflect with you on three major narratives from John's Gospel that's used during Lent: the woman of Samaria, the man born blind, and the raising of Lazarus. But before we do that, I'd like to just show you where we are. I'm Father Dennis McBride. I'm a Redemptorist from Scotland, and I am currently the director of Redemptorist Publications. And just beside Redemptorist Publications, we have this lovely house here, and we're in our house chapel, one of the smallest in the world. And Alessandro, our digital media expert, is going to show you around with a camera around our little chapel. You'll see the altar, the tabernacle, and the sanctuary light. And there's a lovely statue there of the Madonna and Child, which I'm told is French from the 1930s. Then we have our little icon station, and three of the modern icons you see there are by Brother Richard Midwell, who's part of this community at the moment, and he is an iconographer, and he's gifted those to St. Clement's. And finally, you'll notice the icon of Our Lady of Perpetual Succor, the famous icon given to the Redemptorist so that we might let her be known throughout the world. It's not a big chapel, as you can see. Before looking at the three passages from John's Gospel, I hope it might be helpful to have a look at the uniqueness of John's Gospel. And one of the ways you can do that is by comparing John's Gospel very briefly to the Gospels of Mark and Matthew and Luke. If you have a look at this chart now, which you will see, you have the four different worlds of the Gospel. The earliest Gospel is Mark, written about 70, and he puts the Jesus story into the great prophetic story of Israel. He begins his Gospel quoting Isaiah, and then he introduces John the Baptist, and the first time you meet Jesus is as an adult who comes from Galilee down to see John, and he submits to John's baptism. Mark's Gospel does not go outside the great prophetic story of Israel, and he introduces three prophets: Isaiah, John the Baptist, and Jesus. When you move to Matthew's world, as you can see on the chart, Matthew's world is much bigger. He goes back to the 19th century BC. He goes back to the great figure of Abraham. And the first thing he says about Jesus is that Jesus is the son of Abraham, the son of David. This is the great Jewish story. And in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus stays inside the parameters of the Jewish story. He says, I have come to seek out only the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And he tells his own disciples, do not set your feet to pagan territory. Go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So he stays very much inside the world of Judaism. And the first time you hear of Jesus is when Mary is pregnant. When you look at Luke's Gospel, you're in a much, much bigger world. Luke takes the genealogy of Jesus back to Adam, the Son of God. And when you read Luke's Gospel or hear it, you're very much in a different world. You're in the world of the human story. Simeon the prophet will say that Jesus is not just the glory of Israel. Jesus is a light to enlighten the Gentiles. And the first time you hear the mention of Jesus is before Mary is pregnant. Luke moves it back to the Annunciation, when the young Mary is interrupted by this awesome idea that she could become the mother of God. Have a look at John. John moves beyond the prophetic story of Israel. He moves beyond the Jewish story, and he moves way beyond the human story. And he says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John moves beyond creation, beyond time, beyond history, and he insists that this is a divine story, not a human story, not a Jewish story, and not a prophetic story. And if we have a look now at the image of the earth, this is a lovely photograph of the earth from space. That's John's world. It's out beyond the limits and the precincts of the human story. And yet when you look at this image now of the human Jesus, this is a lovely, lovely stained glass window which dates back to the 11th century. It's in the Musée Notre Dame in Strasbourg. It's a very beautiful image, I think. And you have the cosmic image, and then you have the human Jesus. So you have, in John's Gospel, you've got two planes. Jesus will keep saying, I am from above, you are from below. So we're very much introduced to Jesus as the divine story. If you look now, dear friends, let's have a look at the structure of the prologue here, where John begins asserting, as you can see, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through him, all things came to be. Through him. You remember Genesis, where Genesis begins by saying, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And how does God do it? Remember, he does it by speaking. God said, let there be light, and there was light. When God speaks, something happens. When we speak, nothing much happens, really. We decorate the air with language, hoping madly that something will actually happen. And this creation is not alien. John says, all that came to be had life in him. Through him, all things were made. Creation is sacred. It is not an alien thing. It is utterly sacred because it emerges from the Word. A light that shines in the dark, a light that darkness cannot overpower. This is the Logos, the Word. And then he interrupts his meditation on eternity to speak about one man. A man came, sent by God. He came as a witness to speak for the light, so that everyone might believe in him. He was not the light, he was only a witness to speak for the light. Think about that language of John. John's purpose is simple. It is, in the fourth gospel, to act as a witness to speak for the light. This is a different portrait from the Gospels of Matthew and Mark and Luke. In those Gospels, John is the great revivalist figure attracting people out to listen to him. Have a look at this painting by Bruegel, the elder. And there you see John the Baptist in the wilderness, attracting hundreds and hundreds of people. Mark says all Judea and all of Jerusalem came out to hear John. And that's that representative of John attracting people. You don't have that in the Gospel of John. Have a look at Leonardo da Vinci's portrait of John the Baptist. John is on his own, and he's pointing upwards. This is John as a witness who points away from himself to the one who is coming. As John will say, he must grow greater, I must grow smaller. This is the portrait in John's Gospel, John the witness. The prologue continues that this word is coming into the world. You have the great descent now. And what's the response? He was in the world that had its being through him, and the world did not know him. A negative response. The word is the stranger from heaven. He comes to his own domain, and his own people do not accept him. So you've got a double negative point in the prologue here, where Jesus is not known by the world he made and not accepted by the people to whom he belongs. But it's not all negative. Those who do accept him become children of God. And then you have the classic, the Word was made flesh. He lived among us. And we saw his glory. The glory that is his as the only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. This Word is the creator and the ancestor of all. So you notice John does not have a genealogy in his gospel because he sees Jesus as the ancestor and the creator. So that creation and humanity are not alien to God. God so loved the world that he sent his Son. Now, if you look at the final chart there, it says the courtroom of John's Gospel. Bring on the witnesses. My old professor, Father Raymond Brown, gave us a very helpful image. He said you can imagine John's Gospel as a court scene. You're the jury, and John is going to put a case before you. And the case is this. Why does he write his gospel? He says, I tell you this so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and have life in his name. That's John's case. You're the jury. Who does John need to present his case? Who does John need to defend his case? He needs a series of witnesses. So what I've done here when you look at this chart is I've listed out some of the key witnesses that John is going to bring into the courtroom, and you, the jury, are going to listen to this witness, and you have to judge if this witness is honorable or not. Guess who the first witness is? It's John the Baptist. He came as a witness to speak for the light. He was not the light, only the witness. Then you have Nicodemus, the aristocrat, who visits Jesus in the dark because he doesn't want anyone to notice him. But he's still fascinated by Jesus. And he goes to Jesus, this man cautioned on tiptoe to have a one-to-one in the dark with him. But this Nicodemus ends up as a witness. He will defend Jesus in the Sanhedrin, against all the other voices protesting against him. And Nicodemus will stand by the foot of the cross at midday in full light, in public view, to attend his young spiritual director. The woman of Samaria is a brilliant witness because she's already converted most of a town. What better witness could you have of that? I've put her in red because she's the first gospel narrative we'll look at, and you can see her key role in the witnesses of John's gospel. Other witnesses, the works that Jesus performs himself. The Father bears witness to Jesus. The scriptures bear witness to Jesus. Moses witnesses to Jesus. Then we have the whole chapter of 9, which we'll look at. The blind man bears witness to Jesus. Wonderful development of faith in that chapter. Then we'll have the raising of Lazarus, where the act of raising Lazarus itself, John says, leads many Jews to believe in Jesus. So Jesus' acts themselves are his witnesses. Then, as you see there, the Spirit of truth will bear witness to Jesus. The disciples will be witnesses to Jesus. The evangelist himself will be a key witness, and the evangelist school will bear witness to the evangelist himself. The Gospel of John ends, this disciple is the one who vouches for these things and has written them down, and we know his testimony to be true. So from John the Baptist to the end of the Gospel, you see the importance of witness. And the 3 passages that we will be reflecting on, dear friends, are key in the progress of this courtroom drama. Finally, just to leave you, the opening of the first letter of John. Something that has existed from the beginning, that we have heard and we have seen with our own eyes, that we have watched and touched with our hands. The Word who is life, this is our subject. What we have seen and heard, we are telling you, so that you too may be in union with us as we are in union with the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ. John's Gospel is a wonderful reflection on the need to witness to Jesus. Dear friends, not that we keep this experience to ourselves, but we turn our experience of Jesus into a story and offer it to others as good news. And that challenge continues today in the church. In what way do we continue to be witnesses of Jesus? And thank you very much indeed for listening. Thank you.